Next module of poverty. Today we will be categorizing the poor. That how we can divide all those who are below poverty line or those who are above poverty line. जो लोग above poverty line है, they are under one category only, that is they are categorized as non-poor. Now those who are below poverty line, the first category is of chronic poor. By chronic poor, we mean those who are always poor. जो अभी तक right from the beginning या जितना अकाउंट्स हमारे पास है, they have been taking advantage of that below poverty line or they have always remained poor throughout. उनको हम क्या नेम दे रहे हैं? Chronic poor. Second category is of transient poor. By transient we mean those who come in and out. Even here we are dividing them into two categories. A, churning poor, and B, occasionally poor. By churning poor we mean those who move in and out of poverty regularly. For example, the seasonal workers. Agricultural sector में बहुत सारे farmers हैं. During the harvesting season they come out of poverty, and during the sowing season again they are inside the poverty line. And second category is of occasionally poor. Some of the business people who because of maybe the bad patch of luck at times become poor. Occasionally poor जो किसी प्रॉब्लम की वजह से कभी कभार, बहुत कम कभी कभार बिलो पॉवर्टी लाइन आ जाते हैं. चर्निंग पुअर जो हमेशा in out, mainly the seasonal workers, the casual workers. The days they find employment, they are above poverty line. The days they don't find any employment, they are inside the poverty line. So categories of poor: chronic poor, those who are always poor. Transient poor are divided into the two categories, that is churning poor and occasionally poor. And the third category is of non-poor. Now we will be looking at these categories of poor and the causes of poverty through this PowerPoint presentation.
Module of poverty is based on, basically is going to cover two different aspects. The first one is the different categories of poor. कि हम poor को कौन कौन सी categories में divide करते हैं. All those who are poor. All those who are poor means all those who are below poverty line. क्योंकि पॉवर्टी लाइन का हमारा बिगेस्ट ड्रॉबैक था कि ये सिर्फ पॉवर्टी लाइन दो कैटेगरीज में डिवाइड करती है पीपल को, इनटू पुअर एंड नॉन पुअर. सो दोज हु आर बिलो पॉवर्टी लाइन, दोज हु आर पुअर, हाउ we can categorize them further. The category number 1 is of chronic poor. The Hindi meaning for chronic is extreme. So that means chronic poor. द हिंदी मीनिंग जो है वो एक्सट्रीम तो इंग्लिश वर्ड है, बट द हिंदी मीनिंग इज कि जो एकदम लास्ट कैटेगरी में, जो सबसे नीचे वाली कैटेगरी में आते हैं, जिनकी वल्नरेबिलिटी, जिनकी डिफ़िकल्टी या प्रॉब्लम बहुत ज़्यादा है. सो क्रॉनिक पुअर मीन्स पीपल हु ऑलवेज रिमेन पुअर और आर यूजुअली पुअर. मतलब जो हमेशा ही despite of all the help provided, they have been poor right from the beginning, throughout their lives. This is what we mean by chronic poor. Second category is of transient poor. Here transient poor have been divided into two categories. Number 1, the first category here is of churning poor. The first category is of churning poor who regularly move in and out of poverty. मतलब वो हर रोज, आज के दिन उनके पास है, कल नहीं है. So that means they regularly are below poverty line or above poverty line. They keep moving in and out of the poverty line. Then the second category is of occasionally poor. ट्रांजिएंट पुअर को ही हमने फर्दर डिवाइड किया है बिटवीन churning poor and occasionally poor. People who are rich most of the times but sometimes have a bad patch of luck. These people are occasionally poor. maybe because of certain disease, certain epidemic or pandemic, those people who have become poor because of that stage, they are called occasionally poor. So churning poor and occasionally poor both come under the category of transient poor. And people who are never poor, like middle class, upper middle class, rich, very rich, millionaires and billionaires, come under the category of non poor. Looking at poverty trends in India, when we look at poverty trends in India, let's have a look at percentage. 1973-74. 1973-74, 56% of people living in rural areas were living below poverty line, and in urban areas this percentage was 49%, and the total is 53%. Total is 53% in 1973-74. matlab more than 50% of our population was living below poverty line in 1973-74. When we do this comparison of the total 53%, and now if we look at the figures for 2011-12, ये दो figures आपके लिए बहुत major figures हैं, 1973-74 and 2011-12. These are the figures which you need to remember for poverty. That 26%, 56% say 1973 से 74 से, when we move to 2011-12, this figure has come down from 56% to 26%, and for urban poverty from 49%, this figure has come down to 15%, and for total this figure has come down from 53 to 21%. So still 21% of our population is living below poverty line. These are the figures before pandemic. Now this pandemic of COVID-19 is going to affect that further, and there could be a rise of 2 to 3% in the poverty percentage of people living below poverty line. Moving ahead, after poverty trends in India, we will be looking at causes of poverty. What are the different causes of poverty in India? The first and foremost is the reason is underdevelopment of economy. क्योंकि अंडर डेवलपमेंट है, दैट इज़ वाई फिजिकल एंड नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज आर अंडर यूटिलाइज्ड. We don't have the developed technology to utilize all these resources, and that is why our total productive capacity or total production remains low. And when total production is low, it is but obvious that we will have low GDP in the economy. So underdevelopment of the resources की वजह से physical and natural resources are underutilized. Because resources are underutilized, we have moved to a situation that we have low productive capacity, and this low productive capacity has resulted in low GDP in the economy. This is the first reason. Second reason is the pressure of population. India has a large population which is also responsible for poverty. हमारी पॉपुलेशन एक रैपिड रेट पे राइज हो रही है बिकॉज हमारी इकोनॉमी में बर्थ रेट इज स्टिल हाई एंड वी हैव लो डेथ रेट. So that is why population is rising. If we look at the figures, 136.6 crore in 2019. The World Population Day on 12th July 2020, the major aim is that if we have to have resources for our sustainability, there is a need to reduce population growth by reducing or by decreasing the birth rate also. क्योंकि पॉपुलेशन ज़्यादा है इसीलिए बर्डन या डिपेंडेंसी ज़्यादा होगी, उतना ही इनकम डिवाइड होगी, उतना ही रिसोर्सेज डिवाइड हो जाएंगे because of large population, and we will continue to have the large poverty ratio or the greater poverty ratio. Third cause of poverty is inflationary spiral. Those who are already poor, they cannot afford goods and services. They can fulfill their minimum needs or basic needs. Now, what will happen if there is persistent rise in prices? अगर prices rise होते हैं तो commodities become unaffordable by the poor and this affects their standard of living. So that means inflation or rise in prices is also a reason for poverty. Next is unemployment and underemployment. पॉवर्टी और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट एक तरह से सिनोनिम्स हैं एक दूसरे के, कि पॉवर्टी की वजह से अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट है या अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की वजह से पॉवर्टी है. बोथ द वेज इट इज़ अ करेक्ट स्टेटमेंट. सो what happens because of unemployment? The number of dependents on the employed population increases. So this is also a major reason for rising poverty. Next, illiteracy. Because of illiteracy, there is lack of knowledge and education. अगर knowledge and education नहीं है तो obviously the person will have to work in low paid jobs. So high income नहीं है, better job नहीं है, so basic necessities complete नहीं हो सकती. That is why these people who are illiterate, they always remain poor. Next, indebtedness. What happens that poor don't have money, they take loans from rich to meet out their basic needs. When they take loan, they have to pay high interest rate on the borrowings. They again borrow because they cannot repay their loans. So they get trapped in the vicious circle of debt, and these people remain poor generation after generation. Next, unequal distribution of income and wealth. हमारी इकोनॉमी में जितना ग्रोथ हो रहा है वो ज़्यादा ग्रोथ का एक परसेंटेज इज़ गोइंग टूवर्ड्स द रिच. जो पुअर पॉपुलेशन है उनको इसका कोई बेनिफिट नहीं मिल रहा है. दैट इज़ वाई देयर इज़ अ वाइड गैप बिटवीन रिच एंड पुअर एंड दिस हैज़ even worsened the problem of poverty. There are many social factors in our country like caste system, religious beliefs and superstitions which have aggravated the problem of poverty in many regions and areas. Caste system की वजह से many people are not allowed to have education or maybe work for different professions. So all these are the reasons for rising poverty. So to conclude with, now we will be looking at the next concept, that is the next concept which we will be looking at are the measures, which is most important measures to combat. अब हमें reasons पता चल गए. हमने reasons किए ही इसीलिए हैं कि how can we frame the policy. Before we frame the policy, we must be knowing what are the reasons behind that. So with this,